This is Martin bringing you another review of a new bike from Bikes Direct. This is a all new kind of bike. It's called an adventure bike. They've been building these for 3 or 4 years or so, but on Bikes Direct for the last 6 months or so we've had our first opportunity to actually buy one from them. This is the Motobecane Elite, and this is the Adventure version. They now have 4 versions of this bike. They have the Trail, which is one step below this. They have another one with hydraulic brakes, a step above this, and then they have their base model. Before I start the review, there's a lot of confusion out there that I want to clear up. Some of the confusion is about the size of the wheels on these bikes and the spacing between the chainstays on the rear hub. First of all, the 29 wheel and the 700C wheel are exactly the same in diameter. They may be different width in rims, but the diameters are the same. 700C and 29 tires are interchangeable. Let's put this rumor to rest that these are 2 different size tires. They are not. The 29 and 700C are exactly the same size tires. This is a 29er bike, has 700C tires on it, and it works. They mount up perfectly. There's no question about this anymore. Let's put this rumor to rest right now. Next, I'd like to talk about these disc brake road bikes. Now this is supposedly supposed to be in between. I actually wanted a lightweight disc brake road bike with flat bars. That's ideally what I wanted. Actually, the Motobecane Sprint disc bike was perfect, other than it was $700. And again, this starving artist, I can't spend that much on a bike. I'm limited to about $350. This bike runs at 400, but the Elite Trail is $350. So I wasn't able to quite afford to buy the bike I wanted. So I ended up with a heavier version of a cross between a road bike and a mountain bike. This is what's called a lightweight version of a mountain bike, or what they're calling adventure bikes. So I've got it rigged with pretty narrow tires for an off-road bike and pretty fat tires for a road bike. So everything's kind of in between. But I'll get to the review in a second. I first need to talk about the wheel sizes and spacing. One of the problems is there were other bike choices with road bikes with disc brakes, but they were coming with such known bad wheels. I knew I was going to have to replace the wheels right away. And since these disc brake road bikes are pretty new to the industry, the choices in 700C disc braked hub wheels are very small, very, very small. The choices are practically non-existent and expensive. The cheapest set of wheels I could find for a road bike disc braked wheel was about $250, and I'm doing fine with other wheels I'm buying for $130. As long as you care for them and give them some maintenance and true them once in a while, and just do some work on them, they'll stay up. They'll be fine for quite a while. But the problem is the spacing on the rear hubs. The new disc brake road bikes remain at what's their 130 millimeter hub spacing between the chainstays. So the spacing between the hub is 130 millimeters, which is road bike spacing, even though they have disc brakes. So those wheels with a 29er wheel are not interchangeable because the hub size is wider. The hub size on a mountain bike or a 29er or any mountain bike is 135 millimeter. So that's one of the reasons I did not buy like the Motobecane disc road bike. Is only about $500. There's some gravity versions too, but I don't like gravity frames, and I probably won't buy another one. So the problem is the spacing and the availability of 130 millimeter road wheel disc wheels. Now I hope I haven't confused you, so I'm going to review this one more time. The road bikes with disc brakes are still using the standard 130 millimeter spacing on the rear hubs. Now the front wheels are interchangeable. Those remain at 100 for both 29ers, 700Cs, and all the road bikes. But it's the rear hub spacing that was throwing me off. So this bike came with 135 millimeter spacing on the rear, which is a standard 29er mountain bike disc wheel. So I can replace these wheels for as little as $100 now instead of the $250. Now in the future, I'm sure the prices of those wheels will come down, but I don't have the luxury of waiting. I'm still the starving artist, still looking for the strongest components I can buy for my money. This bike I bought with the intention of riding one of the most difficult rides in Northern California. It's a ride up to a 4,200 foot ridge in the Trinity Alps overlooking Trinity Lake. The total ride is around 75 miles from my house, and it's all uphill, and the last 10 miles is all uphill at about a 12 to 15% grade. Those of you not familiar with grading, that is one of the steepest grades you can possibly ride. I've been on 17 and 18s, but not for 10 miles, only for 3 miles. This climb is relentless. It goes for 10 miles without hardly a break at all. I've never seen a cyclist out there as yet, because it is such a challenging ride. All you need to do you don't have to be that strong, you just have to have a bike equipped ready to handle that kind of a climb. So this bike came with wide range mountain bike gearing and a slightly shorter range crank instead of the road crank, and which is normally for a triple it'd be like a 30, 42, 52 chain rings, and a mountain bike crank which would normally be 22, 32, 42 chain rings. This one was right in between at 28, 38, 48. So it worked out pretty good. I'm still in my lowest gear about 40 to 50% of the time on that long 10 mile climb, but I still have the gears I need. You need to get out of the saddle and stand every once in a while anyway, because it's such a difficult climb. So that's one of the main reasons I bought this bike, is for that ride, which is my favorite ride, because the whole time you're climbing, you're in wilderness. There's no houses. You might see 2 or 3 cars because it's all road riding. There's no off-road. You might see 2 or 3 cars on that road the whole time you're there. Hardly anybody knows it's there. Hardly anybody uses it. So it's one of the most perfect road mountain bike ride, or road mountain rides that I can think of. And I go out there pretty much every Sunday and ride it. So this bike was set up almost exclusively just for that, but of course it could be used for anything. So let's get into the review. This bike was not bought from Bikes Direct, but from their sister website, which sells parts. I'm not sure what the association between Bikes Direct and bikeisland.com is. There seems to be a connection there. I don't know what it is. I don't really care. They're both excellent companies. They both treat me really well. But on Bike Island, you will find bikes that were returned and either slightly used or returned scuffed up or something like that. And there's a discount on those bikes. So this was a $400 bike when you buy new. I found this one on Bike Island for $250. $250. I couldn't pass it up. Had to get it. So for $250, I got a $400 adventure bike, and all I had to do was a whole bunch of work to it. So it was my time, but I have more time than I have money, so this worked out very well. This is also going to be an excellent example of what it is to be buying factory direct bikes. Hopefully this is going to work out. I got a nice large lizard heading for my camera. You better not knock it over there, Mr. Lizard. Okay, where was I? I was talking about, oh, I got this on Bike Island at a very big discount. And the only thing wrong with it was the cranks were a little scuffed up. And that's about it. Actually, the frame was in fairly good condition. I am perfectly satisfied with this bike. For that kind of a discount, I'll take the scuff cranks any day. The reason I didn't buy the Elite or the other ones is because of my first choice was the Trail, and then I knew I was going to have to replace the crankset. The Motobecane Trail comes with a crankset that any serious rider will have to chuck right away. You have to get it off the bike. Don't ride it. But then before I could get a chance to buy it, they ran out. And when they came back with new stock, they came back with 4 new models. And this new model, the Adventurer, which is one step above the Trail, came with this Sunter XCR crank. Now I've never ridden this crank and I'm not familiar with it, but I was able to see this crank is being used on specialized rock hopper bikes, and I got to take a look at it. And sometimes I can just look at a crank and know that it's probably going to be pretty good. So spending the extra $50 for the Adventurer was a must, because not only do you get a better crank, but you get better derailleurs and 9-speed gearing. If 9-speed gearing is important to you. I personally don't like anything above 8-speed, because I like the strength of the wide chain that comes with an 8-speed. I like the strength of the gearing. But for an adventure bike where I need a wide range of gearing for road and off-road, the 9-speed is working out just fine. I've ridden 9 speeds before, it's not a problem. You'll never probably find me on 10 or 11 speeds. That's, well, that whole gearing thing is a mess. I've done some gearing videos. You can take a look at it. The engineers are not doing the gears on bikes correctly. They never have. The spacing between the gears are always wrong. They're always spaced wrong. And as they pile on these gears in the back, all they do is make narrower and narrower chains, which is a weaker and weaker drivetrain. And you can't even use those gears. If you look at the manual on an 11-speed bike, it's going to tell you not to use the last 3 or 4 gears on the bike when you're on the extremes. So if you're in the middle chain ring, they don't even want you to use the last 4 gears, last high 4 gears on the cassette. It's a ridiculous thing going on. If they would just build a proper 8 or 9-speed cassette with the right spacing, you don't need those extra gears. It's nothing but overlaps. You have 3 gear ranges from the front and the rear, and every time you go up a gear range on the front, you're going to have overlaps in gears. You don't have 27 usable gears on this bike. There's overlaps. There's about 5 or 6 gears that are exactly the same, or so near the same that you're not getting extra gears. So I wish the engineers would go out for a bike ride and figure out what they're doing wrong. But we'll move on from there. When the bike came, it was advertised as a lighter version of what you might pay for the same price for a mountain bike. But to tell you the truth, if it's a lighter bike, I can't tell. This is one of the heavier bikes I own. So the weight is, you're not going to get a lightweight bike. You're not going to get a lightweight road bike with disc brakes. But what I found is, it is heavy. When you go to accelerate at the bottom of a hill, you're going to feel the weight. You're going to feel the weight when you're stopping and going. But once the weight was rolling, the bike rolls along very nicely on these 700C wheels. I went with a 35mm tire, which is about 1.5 inches, and it was the perfect choice. It rolls just fine on the road, and on this dirt road I'm on here, it's also just fine. It's not going to be any good on a soft trail with large rocks. You're going to fall in between the rocks into the soft soil. But it's not designed as a heavy-duty mountain bike. It's designed as a heavy-duty road bike that can take a little off-roading, like where we're at today. I was able to ride from my house up here and hop on this little logging road and enjoy some peace and quiet out here in beautiful Northern California. So I'm going to get to the part that I first talked about, and that's this bike came needing a lot of work. So this is the perfect example of probably the maximum amount of work you'd have to do when you buy a factory direct bike. Anytime you buy a factory direct bike, it's a roll of the dice of how well it's adjusted and ready to go. You have to assume that nothing is ready to go. The fact that I've gotten 4 Bike Direct bikes that were nearly ready to go when I got it, I guess I feel just lucky. Most of those bikes required very little work to get them in top perfect working order. This one required a lot. So let's go through some of the things I had to do when I built this bike up. They always come fairly well assembled. The handlebars are always unattached. Sometimes the front disc brake is unattached. This one came with the disc brake attached, and the headset was attached. So all I had to do is attach the handlebars and put on a front wheel. That was about it. But the rest of it was maintenance, or the rest of it was getting the bike into perfect operating condition. And if you're not a mechanic, you best find one, or find a friend that is, because you cannot. I do not ride bikes that are not in perfect operating condition. I share the road with cars, and it can be very dangerous out there on a bike that's not working properly. So all my bikes are always taken excellent care of, and the maintenance is always done on them so they are working perfectly. So what I had to do on this bike was, first thing I noticed was the front wheel was way out of true. And as I begin to true it up, I noticed the front spoke tensions were way low. So it took a couple of a lot of work and a couple of rides to work in this front wheel. But for cheap, this is another cheap set of wheels. Can't complain about what you get. But I chewed this up one more time before I went on my favorite ride last Sunday, and it has worked wonderfully. Now the road I described was paved, but there is a lot of chuck holes and dirt on it from all the logging trucks running it. So what I do is I have a lockout fork on this bike. I lock the fork out on the climb, but I use the suspension fork on the way down on the road, because it's you're trying to control a very high speed, and it's a wilderness area, so the shadows of the trees are on the road, and it's really hard sometimes at that speed to identify a hole. So I use the shock to absorb any bumps that I may miss on the way down, and that works out really nice too. But getting back to the maintenance issues, so the first thing was the truing of the front wheel. And after, like I said, 2 rides, it's now in perfect operating condition. It works wonderfully. Rear wheel was out of true, not near as bad as the front, and the spoke tension was fairly good. So I just did a little maintenance truing on that, and it's been fine too. So this long, steep 10-mile climb, when I stand on the pedals, puts a huge strain on the rear wheel, and it is running perfectly. it's still in two. So these wheels are Wienemann DA17s, I think, which I was unfamiliar with. But it sound, you know, anything was better than those Alex R450s that I had before, and that came on those other disc brakes bikes. So I was willing to take anything but those. And this is gonna be a very good wheel. They're 32 spokes. If they were 36, they'd probably be really solid. But they're 32, and I think they're gonna do just fine. Especially with these wide 35 millimeter tires on it. Wide heavy-duty tires on a rim, I think, reinforce the rim. As soon as you drop into the 25 and 23 millimeter range, I don't think they support the rim much at all. So back to the maintenance. On the rear wheel, also when I took it off, I checked the tension of the lock ring on the cassette, which is the last screw-in part of this cassette, and it was really loose. So if anybody missed that, it probably would have fell off on the road. So that needed tightened. The gears were completely out of adjustment. They were dragging on the front derailleur in 6 or 7 different gears. So there was a complete new adjustment on the gears, and the front derailleur needed to be repositioned on the frame to work properly. So not only was the gears out of adjustment, but it wasn't sitting in the proper place on the seat tube. It wasn't clamped in the proper place. Next, the crankset was fine, except for of course, the crankset bolts on these tapered bottom brackets always need checked. I will check those crank bolts every other ride, because they will loosen up on these cheaper cranks. I've run Campanolo Super Records, and I tightened those up once and I never worried about them again. But on these cheaper cranks, you do got to check those all the time. It's kind of like, you know, fill your tires and check your crank bolts, because that's the only thing on the bike that's probably going to come loose fairly quickly. Next, of course, you have to adjust the headset. That's a given. Also, the disc brakes were completely out of adjustment. The pull on the brakes were almost back to the handlebars. So the brakes were completely out of adjustment. So I unbolted the brakes, centered them, and they had too much cable running to the stop. So I pulled some cable in, and now the brakes are wonderful. When I first got on it, I've not experienced these. These are Tektro Aquila, whatever. These are Tektro Aquila brakes. I've been running Tektro IOs on my mountain bike, and those are just a beautiful brake. We're talking about a very inexpensive mechanical brake that I use for long downhills, and my hands don't get tired. They're just a wonderful brake. These Aquilas are not quite as nice as those, but they do work fine, and I did want disc brakes for those long sharp-cornered downhills on my favorite ride. It's only about a lane or 1.5 lanes wide, so unfortunately when you're going down that hill you can't let it out. You can't just go screaming in the corners. The corners are almost 90 degrees, and you could easily run into the grill of a truck on the other side. So coming down a hill involves heavy braking for 10 miles. These brakes are doing fine. They're squeaking, but I'm going to work on that a little bit. A lot of times the squeak comes from the brakes being adjusted too flat against the disc. If you can get a little bit of a camber or a little bit of a side adjustment to them so that they don't go flat into the disc, if they go into the disc a little on the side, sometimes you can take care of that squeak. I don't know. I'm going to keep trying. Next, both hubs, the hub bearings were adjusted very poorly and very tight. They wouldn't have lasted very long at all. And that lizard's trying to get into the picture again. But so both hubs need to be adjusted, and if they weren't adjusted, I would have worn out the bearings in just a very short time. So pretty much everything on this bike needed work done, and that was probably my worst case scenario of buying a factory direct bike. But again, I have to, we have to expect that when buying a factory direct bike. You get the bike cheap because you're eliminating the bike mechanic in the store. He's an expert mechanic and he deserves money, and they get it. So you are saving money on these bikes mainly because you are the mechanic. So let's get into the handling part of this bike. This is a very unusual frame set. It has a very shallow head tube angle. I think it's around 70 or 71 degrees, and a very steep seat tube angle at 74 degrees. So this seat tube angle, if you shoved your seat forward, you're getting into triathlon bike territory. So I thought that was really interesting too, because one of the reasons I have so many bikes is so I can ride in a completely different position every single day. I now have 5 bikes, which gives me, if I ride each bike once a day, that gives me 5 days in between positions. So between changing positions and using different manufacturers of shorts, I'm able to ride, commute, and have fun on a bike for 12 to 15,000 miles a year without any skin wearing off or any serious problems. So I was very curious to try this out, and I do like this 74 degree seat tube angle, bringing me forward on the cranks. The 175 millimeter cranks, of course, you need to move farther forward anyway to make up for the distance that the extra length of crank is. But I feel very centered over the bottom bracket, and I feel like I have a lot of power for climbing, and you certainly do need it on that ride. So the steeper seat tube angle, I think, is working out fine. I have my saddle right now centered on the seat post, so I have about a 1/2 inch forward and a 1/2 inch back movement left, and I won't be going back, but I will try going forward and experiment with that. I've seen a lot of conflicting YouTube videos where people tell you how to position yourself on a bike, and I'm going to release my own video and give you the whole total truth on what's going on. Most people use their own perspective and go, okay, this is what I think it should be, and this is what works for me, and they totally forget about all the different sized people and the mechanical disadvantages and advantages of different length bone structures are. They just forget about all that. All they do is tell you what worked for them, and that's wrong. So we're going to go through a very extensive video on bike fit, and be looking for that. So for the rest of this bike, I'm going to tell you what doesn't come on it and which I put on it. Of course, it doesn't come with a bag, it doesn't come with this rack, it doesn't come with bottle cages or bottles, it doesn't come with these pedals, it doesn't come with these handlebars, and it doesn't come with these aero bars. It came with perfectly usable handlebars, but they have the rise in them, and that little rise means I can't mount aero bars to it. I need a perfectly flat bar to mount aero bars to it. I'm going to give you some close-up pictures of the modifications I made for this, because on a flat bar bike you need a really creative handlebar system to keep your hands from going numb and to be comfortable on very long rides. So I went with the seat rack this time, seat post rack, because I bought the frame a little smaller than normally what I would ride. So I knew that the seat post rack would be farther down on the seat post, because I was going to have so much seat post sticking out of the bike. I bought the bike smaller so that I was more in a road bike position than a mountain bike position. Now other times, you've seen my other videos where I buy the bike bigger than what I want, and that's because I had aero bars, but I didn't want to be in the aero bar position. I wanted to be in a road bike position on the aero bars, and the bigger frame got me that. Also, the bigger frame pushes you behind the crankset and gives you a totally different position. I raced for a long time behind the cranks instead of over the cranks. It was just a better position for me. All the people on bikes on YouTube will disagree with that, but it worked at the time. It was ultra marathon riding, and I needed to be in the saddle for 400 miles a day in 20 hours, and that position just worked. And I don't argue with what works. So I went with this one because all the other seat post racks that mount to seat posts, if you have wide legs, they're going to the clamp is so big it's going to hit your legs. So unless the clamp is low enough, unless your frame is small enough and you can get the clamp low, it's going to hit your legs. So anybody looking for a rack that clamps to the seat post, make sure, if you go to the bike shop, make sure you try it first and see. If you're going to buy off the internet, then pretend your seat post is twice as wide as it is and see if your legs will clear. Otherwise, you're going to have to go with the standard rack if you want a rack on the bike. As I said, I went with the flat bars. The other change, of course, is the extensions. I don't know if you can even buy these extensions anymore. They're L-shaped. They're not just the tab, they're L-shaped. The L-shape gives you an outside position for your arms out here, which is a 90-degree rotation from the flat bar, but it also, which is good for climbing, but which also gives you a place where you can lay your hands flat across this bar, because the L shape brings it back in. So these are just excellent bar ends. You just may have trouble finding them. These bar ends I've used, I think they're about 25 years old. I haven't seen any lately. If you can find some, good luck to you. Of course, the other is the aero bars. The aero bars with these flip-up pads give me that one last position where my hands don't hurt at all. I mean, they're completely unweighted. So again, I'm talking about, I have 4 main positions on this bike, plus a whole bunch of positions in between. And the more positions you got, the more comfortable you're going to be, because not only are you changing positions for your palms not falling asleep, but every time you change, your shoulder articulates in a different position, and you use different shoulder muscles to support you then. So wait till the end of the video and the review, and I'll show you the close-up version, close-ups of these handlebars. So I have one main position that on the flat bars as normal. I have the outside position, which is a 90-degree articulation of my hand, and I have another forward position where I can lay my hands across, and I can really get down into the same aero position by just laying my hands across there and bending my elbows when I ride into headwinds. But I also got the aero bars as my final position. So I got aero bars 1, flat hands across there 2, side 3, and the normal bars 4. That's 4 main positions. That's really good for long rides. And the only other custom is tires. Like I say, I always replace tires. I don't use the stock tires. Tires are far too important. So again, these are specialized, which the only tires I run, and they're Armadillos, which is the only protection I use. So these are the specialized Armadillo Infinities at 35 millimeter. And 35 millimeter, yeah, well, you can go, I think, up to 2 inches on this bike. So width of a tire is not a problem unless you want to run a really fat mountain bike tire. I would not suggest anybody buying this bike to be doing hardcore 29er riding. That's not what this bike's designed for, and this shock isn't going to work for you for that either. It does come with a shock, and it comes with a lockout, which is mandatory for the road. You do not want to be using a shock without a lockout on the road. It'll just absorb all your energy. It'll take a long ride and make it much, much longer. So this fork is, it works great as a lockout. It's got a little bit of cushion while it's locked out. It's not a great fork. In the shock position, it's got a short amount of travel, and the travel is stiff. And and even though I've got it as soft as it'll go, it returns very, very quickly. So it's a really pogo-y type of shock. But for the light stuff you're going to do here, it's fine to soak up the bumps, and it does a great job of soaking up those big chuck holes when I hit them coming down that steep, long hill. So the biggest disappointment of the fork is, for the first time, you cannot shift this fork while you're riding. You cannot go from the shock to the lockout, or from the lockout to the shock while you're riding. You have to stop, completely unload the bike before it'll make the switch. If I load the bike at all, it locks up. They may have done that on purpose because people were crashing while messing with their forks. I don't know, but it's really disappointing to me that I can't turn it on and off of the road, because when I go for a ride, I don't stop. I never put a foot down. I go continually for anywhere from 4 to 6 hours without stopping. So to have to stop on the side of the road just to flip the switch on the shock, I find to be most disappointing. And that's the most disappointing part about this bike, besides the advertised weight. It's going to be a heavy bike. So for those of you buying this bike for the road, don't do it. Don't buy this bike for the road unless you gotta have disc brakes. Go to the Motobecane cafe for $400. It's going to be a much lighter bike. It's going to have V brakes on it, which are great brakes, but you're gonna end up with a much more lighter, responsive bike. The only reason you're going to go to this is for adventure riding, and this kind of market is really kind of new, and I'm not sure who's actually looking to buy these bikes. I think people are buying them to get into cheap 29er off-roading, but I think that's a real mistake. I think it'd be better. The 29ers are coming down in price now, so you don't have to compromise, I don't think, on a mountain bike. If you're going to ride off-road, get a mountain bike. Don't compromise. You don't want the bike falling apart on you. You don't want the bike being used for something it wasn't designed to be used for. Bikes aren't very strong to begin with, so as soon as you push them over their limit, they're going to fail, and you don't want them to fail with you on them. So I guess that's about all I have to say. It's been a fairly long interview. The pedals, I forgot, the pedals I went with are called campus pedals. They're SPD on one side, and just a flat pedal on the other. So when I run into a place where I think I'm going to get stuck or something, I just flip them over and I run without the SPDs. I do not like SPDs off-road. My off-road bike still uses conventional toe clips and just a plain old bike shoe. I've never gotten used to these SPDs off-road. SPDs on-road, they're fine. I think they have too much slop in them. I think the degree that they give you for looseness, or what, I don't know, they probably do it for so your knees track better or something. I'm not sure what the reasoning was, but they got too much slop in there for me. I'd rather see about half of that, or none for that matter. And that's about it. Let me hang on and I'll show you some close-up